Are you certain the users accessing your applications, systems, and Azure environment are who you think they are? Are users restricted to seeing and doing only what they should? My name is Eric Boyd. I am an Azure MVP, a Microsoft Regional Director, and the founder of ResponsiveX, where we help customers run workloads and develop applications in Azure. Microsoft provides many tools and capabilities to secure your Azure cloud environment, infrastructure, and applications. Identity and access management is an essential component of security. Microsoft Entra ID, what used to be known as Azure Active Directory, is the Microsoft Identity and Access Management service integrated into Azure that enables you to secure your Azure environment and applications. In this video, I'm going to explain what Microsoft Entra ID is and how it's integrated with your Azure subscriptions, and how you can use it to secure your Azure environment and enable your applications to securely access your Azure resources. Microsoft Entra ID is Microsoft's cloud-based identity and access management service. It empowers organizations to secure and manage identities across applications, devices, and services for hybrid and multi-cloud environments. While Entra ID has many features and a robust set of identity and access management capabilities, at the core, you can simply think of Entra ID as being a place to store login and user account information, which enables Entra ID to ensure secure access to applications and services. We often refer to this login and user information as identity. Identities get authenticated by Entra ID. An identity could be a user who interactively provides a username and password. An identity could also be an application or service that authenticates using secret keys or certificates. You might also refer to identities as accounts. Accounts are simply identities with additional data, like information about a user. Because Microsoft Entra ID uses modern web standards, multiple applications can federate with Entra ID and provide users with a simplified single sign-on experience across many applications. This can include Microsoft services like Microsoft 365 or partner applications that enable users to log in with their Microsoft Work or school accounts, and even your own custom applications. Azure is a great example of integration with Entra ID. When you create an Azure subscription, it gets associated with an Entra ID directory. It can be an Entra ID directory that you already have, or you can create a brand new Entra ID directory. Since your Entra ID directory can be associated with your Azure subscription as well as Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, third-party services, and your own custom applications, you get to manage a common set of identities using Entra ID. You want to ensure that you associate your Azure subscription with the most appropriate Entra ID directory as early as possible. While it's possible to change the Entra ID directory associated with your Azure subscription, as you create dependencies between Azure services and Entra ID identities, it becomes increasingly difficult to make that change later. And as an example of a scenario where you might want to change your Entra ID directory, if you accidentally created a new Entra ID tenant and directory when you created your Azure subscription, but you think you might want to share access to resources in your Azure subscription with coworkers, you probably want to change your Entra ID directory to your organization's directory. And there are other scenarios where you might need to change an Entra ID directory. For instance, if your organization was purchased by or merged with another organization, or was divested from a larger organization, those are two common scenarios where Entra ID tenants and directories will change. Let's go to the Azure portal and look at the Entra ID tenant associated with my Azure subscription. In the Azure portal, I'm going to browse and select a subscription. I'll be shown the overview details for my subscription. In these details, you'll see things like the subscription ID, subscription name, and other details like billing information. You'll also see directory. This is your Entra ID tenant or directory that is associated with this Azure subscription. I can have access to multiple Azure subscriptions, and my organization can have multiple Azure subscriptions, and they can be associated with multiple Entra ID tenants or directory. But it's generally a good practice to consolidate to a single Entra ID tenant for your organization, so you only have to manage a single directory of identities and users. In the subscription command bar, you'll see a button labeled Change Directory. If you need to associate your subscription to a different Entra ID directory, you can click this button, select a different Entra ID directory that you are a member of, confirm that you understand the action you are about to perform, and then you can press the change button to change the Entra ID directory that is associated with your Azure subscription. Now that we have our Azure subscription associated with the most appropriate Entra ID directory, we can share access with others. This is where Azure Role-Based Access Control, or RBAC, comes into play. With Azure RBAC, you can grant identities from your Entra ID directory access to Azure resources. And as I mentioned, this is role-based access control, not just access control. This means that you can grant fine-grained permissions to these identities through predefined roles, and you can even create your own custom roles with whatever combination of permissions you require. In the video of this series titled Organizing Your Azure Resources, I explained the hierarchical organization that's possible within your Azure environment. This is important because not only can you grant specific permissions, but you can scope the grants to a specific resource, a resource group, an Azure subscription, or a group of Azure subscriptions using management groups. This robust role-based access control gives you the ability to secure your Azure environment using principles like least privilege to ensure users only have access to the resources necessary for their tasks, reducing the risk of unauthorized access and data breaches. Let's go to the Azure portal and grant others access to our Azure resources. You'll see an option in the left pane or resource menu for Access Control IAM. IAM is an acronym for Identity and Access Management. If you click on Access Control IAM, you will see several options for managing access, including buttons that enable you to see what access you have and what access others have. If you click on the Roles tab, you will see a list of available roles. You can search and filter this list using the controls at the top. If you click on the Role Assignment tab, you can see what roles are currently assigned to identities from your Entra ID directory. To assign a role to a user or identity in Entra ID, click the Add button in the command bar and select Add Role Assignment from the menu. Then you can select a role, for example, Reader. Then click the Next button to go to the Members tab. From here, you can select the type of identity you want to add to the Reader role. Click Select Members, find and select the members to add, and press the Select button. Click the Next button to go to the Review and Assign tab. If everything looks correct, press the Review and Assign button and add the role assignment. Now we just added a Reader role assignment to the Azure subscription. You can also browse to resource groups or specific resources in the Azure portal, and you'll see Access Control IAM in the left pane, providing the same capabilities that we just saw on the Azure subscription. Entra ID provides additional capabilities to boost your security posture, including multi-factor authentication, biometric and passwordless sign-ins, conditional access policies, and more. Since Azure is taking advantage of the powerful capabilities of Entra ID for identity and access management, you gain all of the benefits of Entra ID when managing access to your Azure environment. You can manage the capabilities of Entra ID by going to the Entra ID Admin Center at entra.microsoft.com. From there, you can manage users, groups, devices, applications, and other identities that are part of your Entra ID directory. You've seen how Microsoft provides tools and capabilities like Entra ID to secure your Azure cloud environment, infrastructure, and applications. And you've seen how Azure Role-Based Access Control, or RBAC, provides a robust way to manage fine-grained access to your Azure resources. Before I wrap up, I'd like to invite you to join me at our weekly Azure Live Q&A session. During the 30-minute session, I will host an interactive and live Q&A to answer your Azure questions.